Hi guys, this is Anna and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new, this channel talks about books, my reading plans, and in this video in particular I would like to talk about my plans for December 2017. It's coming towards the end of the year. I have quite a big chunk of December as a holiday because I finished work on the 19th, so I have quite a lot of books planned. We'll see how it goes, but before I show you the books I thought I'll talk about the giveaway which has ended yesterday. That was the book I was giving away, which I've read earlier in the summer this year, and there were 30 people who have entered, and the person who was chosen by the random number generator was Ekaterina. I have already written her a message asking for the address. If you're watching this video, can you please send me your address via a private message, or if that doesn't work, via private message on Instagram, because I don't really fancy anyone's address to be publicly displayed. Thanks to all of you who have participated. If you have not won the book, I'm sure there will be more giveaways at some point on my channel, because I only keep some of the books I read, I don't keep everything. Right, delving into my plans for December. There are a lot of books I would like to show you. I have started quite a few of them, but what I would like to do first is I'd like to show you the two books which I know for a fact I will be reading. Everything else I might be reading but not finishing. There is one book I want to definitely finish, and that's the Luminaries. The reason why I'm so adamant that I would love to finish it is because I'm going to read it this month as a buddy read. We wanted to read it earlier in the fall, but the life got into the way, so we now decided that we're going to read it before the end of this year in December. I have to say, I couldn't wait, and I have started reading it today. I'm about 60 pages in, and so far I know I'm going to love this book. I love the language. I deliberately wanted to go into this blind, not knowing what the story is about. I know it is a mystery. I know it's set in the 19th century. I know it's set in New Zealand, because you could not avoid all of the conversations surrounding this book back in 2013, because this was a debut novel for a New Zealand author which won the Man Booker Prize that year. And if you watch Steve Donahue's channel, which probably every single one of you does, you know that he has multiple copies of this book on a mantelpiece behind him, appearing in quite a few of his videos. So both Helen and me were intrigued to see why he loves this book so much. This is going to be my priority. Judging by how much I've read just today in the last hour, I have a feeling that I might just gallop through the book, because it reminds me of Dickens in the way it's written, the language. I love Victorian language, so I think this is going to be a page turner, so we'll see. And the second book, which I would really like to finish before the month is over and the year is over, is The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood. I talked about me reading her Handmaid's Tale earlier in the summer, and that was the first book I've ever read by the author. And then so many of you, thanks guys, have written back saying that this was the book which you found to be superior, you really liked, and I'm sure the Man Booker Prize judges agree with you, because it has been a winner back in 2000. It's quite a chunky book, so far two big chunkers, two winners, 13 years apart, but that's the big plan. Now, going towards the book I have been quietly reading. Some of you have seen, some of you haven't. So I'm gonna start with the book I'm reading in Russian. You know, if you've been watching my channel for a while, that I love Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn, and I'm trying to collect all of his works published in this edition in Russian. This is volume 1 out of 30. So those are his short stories, collection of short stories and short novellas, published in the 50s and the 60s. And I've started from the front, so I have finished his One Day in the Life of Alexander Denisovich, Ivan Denisovich I think it's called, which I really liked. I really enjoyed it, but I found it obviously difficult to deal with. Yeah, those are the short stories published between 1959 and 1966. They actually have been published back in the Soviet Union. I have read the longest one, I believe, out of all of them, One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, which has been translated into English and most people have heard about it. So what I'm going to do in December, I'm going to continue with those short stories, and then there is a break and then we go to the short stories written between 1993 and 1998. Then there is like another massive break in the book, and then you switch to his short stories between 1958 and 1963. I have not read a single one of them. And then we go to quite a modern list, so 1996, 1999. I don't want to rush this, but I have to say, when I get into his writing, I seem to go really quickly. It's a bit of a Marmite, but I really like him. And I wish more of his short stories has been translated into English. Another book I have been quietly reading on the background is the autobiography by Hilary Mantel called Giving Up the Ghost. This is published in a beautiful, slightly foxed edition, and I am reading it really slowly. The language is absolutely luscious, as everything ever written by Hilary Mantel. Honestly, this woman, she can write advertisements or TV guide and I will still read it, because her language is just that exquisite. I'm reading it slowly. She's dealing with her childhood, the onset of puberty, and during the onset of her puberty she started to have symptoms of endometriosis. This is which has afflicted her throughout her life. One of the reasons why she turned to writing in more detail, because she realized she couldn't have a child. She deals quite openly with it in the book. I highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it. It was published quite a while back, I think in the 90s or early 2000s, but it has just been reprinted last year as book number 37 by the Slightly Fox, so I have it in this edition. I'm also slowly coming towards the end of The Djinn, an intimate history by Siddhartha Markhiji. I'm really sorry for butchering his name. He is an oncologist, he is a cancer geneticist and scientist. It's not his first book. In fact, he has won the Pulitzer Prize back in 2011 with his other book, The Intimate History pretty much of Cancer, called The Emperor of All Maladies. This is the book which came out in 2016, but he has written it back in 2015. So it's slightly outdated. It's about 2 years now since he's done his last draft of the manuscript. And if you know nothing about genetics, then you will absolutely enjoy this book. If you know quite a bit about genetics, then to me so far it's like a book of two halves. I absolutely loved everything up to 2000 in this book, but the recent stuff is quite general. I don't know. If you think that you would like me to do a separate review on this book, please leave a comment down below, so I'll talk about this book separately. It's definitely worth a read. I can see why it was longlisted for the Wellcome Trust collection last year in 2016, or for the Royal Society this year for the Science Award. It is definitely a good read, but I have read his previous book and I liked the previous book more. So yeah, couldn't finish this one. And then I have finished reading In the Name of the Rose, and the one book which was cited heavily was Jorge Luis Borges. Basically not just this book, but all the works by Borges. And I decided that, okay, I'm gonna finally pick it up. I have purchased this book earlier this year. You have seen it on my channel. It's a collection of short stories called The Labyrinth, and I finally started reading it. I'm going super slow. I'm doing a ridiculous amount of notes. I'm absolutely besotted with this. I think it's fantastic. But his short stories, honestly, you can take every single one of his short stories and you can expand on it, and you can write a full-length novel or a series into the fantasy world. It's that good. Which means that even though there may be 5 to 10 pages each, they require quite a lot of attention and a lot of thought post-reading. So I'm restricting myself. I probably read about 6 to 7 stories a week, and then I move away deliberately so I can think about them more. And it's working really well because I actually remember every single of the short stories I've read so far. And I'm kind of more towards the end of the book. I've read 2/3 of the book, because not all of the short stories, some parts of it are his non-fiction essays. I would love to read more non-fiction by him, because everything he writes is just fantastic. He is a person of such erudition, such level of knowledge, that he makes references in blasé way, which send you on a tangent to go and just investigate. I've made so many notes while reading this on the side, and I went and expanded my knowledge. I found new authors. I looked at the authors I already wanted to read or read before in a different way. I would highly recommend. I'm going to finish it before Christmas, and probably as soon as I finish this one, I will get to his next book. 6 books has been published by the Penguin Modern Classics as a collection. I have 3 at home, and I will purchase the others so I can have all of them. Really enjoy this. Also, I was aiming to read more on the Polish history, and it didn't happen. Then I aimed to finish the Historically Inevitable book. It didn't happen as well. The main reason is I was reading a fiction book I talked about my plans for November. The one written in Ukrainian has not been translated into English yet, and I decided I need to know or refresh in a way my knowledge of the time period a bit more. And conveniently, this book was in local Waterstones. It's called The Red Famine. It's written by Anne Applebaum. You probably heard about Anne Applebaum. She had a really well-received book early, a couple of years ago, called The Gulag, which I'm still in a sort of, it's been on my TBR for years, ever since it's been published. I planned to read it this year, it didn't happen, but I picked this one up because it was in a local store. I'm kind of, again, a third into this book. I'm really enjoying it. I think she is a fabulous storyteller. It is a proper academic work, but it reads as a fiction. It's a very easy read in that respect. It's a very thoughtful writing, and there's nothing I disagree about with this book. And it deals with quite a turbulent time period in Ukraine and in Russia. It focuses more on the Ukraine because she had more access, obviously, to the archives in Ukraine. She worked with the Ukrainian society in Canada and in the United States. They provided a lot more access, but Russia is still not trying to, like, they actively trying not to talk about this whole issue. Putin apologized about the famine caused in the early 20th century by Stalin. Well, it was inflicted by the Stalin. Back in 2008, it was the first acknowledgement ever made. People knew about this, but people did not talk about it. It talks about basically a horrendous famine which happened in those territories several times. So first in the late 1920s, and then horrendous one in the 1930s, sort of between World War I and World War II, when the Soviet authority were trying to establish themselves as a Soviet Union and Ukraine wanted to be a separate country. It is a fascinating read. It's really well researched, and I would highly recommend this. So this is what I'm going to continue to read this month. And then if I have time, because I'm reading the G&D Demon History, it kind of made me want to go back and read some of the books I have read previously. So I looked at my shelves and I was like, okay, what do I want to reread? So the first one is The Obvious Candidate. This is the book which has won the Pulitzer Prize for the author. It's the same author, and it talks about cancer. I have read it previously back in 2011. I know it's a bit outdated one, but it's really well written, so I think I might read this. Or I might actually seek the classics. I have quite a few Darwin's books which I have read back at my A-levels and undergrads, and I had a look at the shelves, and the one I've read once and then kind of forgot about is The Voyage of the Beagle. So this is his diary where he describes his day-to-day life. It's not his theory of evolution. No, this is his sort of day-to-day mundane life, and it's quite old-fashioned in the way it's written, but I do like that kind of language. So I might read that. That has been written between 1831 and 1836, so it spans a period of 5 years. Or I can go into the more thought-provoking book, What is Life by Schrödinger. And this book, honestly, it has been read by every single individual between 1930s and 1970s. Every scientist I know has read this book multiple times. I've read it several times. I have it in the Compton edition. This is Cambridge University Press. I've read it several times. I really like it. It's an interesting attempt by a physicist to delve into biology
and to put a physicist perspective, mathematician perspective onto genetics in the early 20th century. Schrödinger came to England from Germany because of the Nazi Germany uprising, and he did not want to stay back there, so he came here in the United Kingdom, and he was really interested in the field of genetics. A lot of physicists, when they left Germany, they switched fields and they went into genetics because they were deeply unhappy with the way this physics was back then. I remember that a lot of the Manhattan Project and the Russian nuclear program came from the Germans. The Germans were at the forefront of the nuclear research and the physical research in the physics early 20th century, so 1920s, 1930s. They won more Nobel Prizes than any other nation back at the time. And many of them have chosen to go into biological fields, so creating what we call a physical medicine field, or medical physics. It's really, really fascinating. Or, as another analogy, I just picked it up in my local Cambridge shop, in the Cambridge University shop. This is a signed copy called Genes, Determinisms and God by Denis Alexander, and this is a series of the lectures he gave back in 2012 in St Andrews College up in Scotland, St Andrews University, I beg your pardon. And I mean, it's been 5 years, but 2012 was the year I finished my PhD, so I kind of departed from active genetics. Well, I still did a postdoc, okay, fine. I still know everything in terms of what's happening even now because I keep up my reading, but it's sort of more modern compared to my undergrad knowledge, and it came out a couple of months ago, so it has been updated with everything which is going on, like the CRISPR technology is more explained, epigenetics is much more explained, and epigenetics is something which is not explained in this book enough, in my opinion. So yeah, I might actually read this one. We'll see. If you guys have seen any of the books in this video, you've read any of the books, so you're planning to read them, please do let me know. Maybe you can have any other recommendations, particularly with regards to non-fiction. What should I pick up? I kind of feel invigorated to go back and reread some of my non-fiction library section on the history of science, because the literature review in this book is really good. It's worth buying just for that. In fact, I recommended it to my year 12 students, but none of them wanted to pick me up on my offer yet. So yes guys, see you in my next video. Happy reading, bye!